Hello and welcome to the Supper Talk podcast, where we are going to have all those dinner time conversations that nobody really wants to have. I'm Chris, and this is my dad, Steve.
Howdy.
And today we are going to solve all the world's problems over non alcoholic beers. I personally am drinking a beer out of Idaho, Haley, Idaho. It's Atmos Brewing Company's Prospect NA Amber. What are you drinking today, Dad?
I'm drinking an athletic Sunset Stoke.
This is another one that I can't have, isn't it?
It is. There's I mean, I'll plug them because I think they're a great company.
I do
So
too.
if you don't live in Idaho, I think Idaho is the only state that doesn't allow it.
Yep.
But Athletic Brewing Company, they have a brew club, and they mail beer to your door.
Unless you're in Idaho, because the lawmakers in Idaho are stupid.
So they've got all these great flavors, all styles of beer, and every month, so there's a rotating handle. Like if you go to a brewery, there's a rotating handle, and every month on my subscription, I get 2 6 packs of some new beer that they've got, and then I subscribe to like that the one that I just showed. I can't remember what it is. Yeah, the Sunset Stoke. There's a bunch of other styles that
Well, you
I
told me about that one that was like the raspberry mocha with the lactose in it, so it was like a creamy raspberry chocolate. Sounds delicious.
It
Uh,
is delicious. And then like every morning I drink beer for breakfast, but it's a dark style beer that's got like actual coffee in it. So it's caffeinated non-alcoholic beer. It's delicious.
I, because why wouldn't you? I mean, at that point, it's just your morning coffee.
It's called First Run. Yeah, so I mean I get a couple cases of beer every month delivered to my doorstep, and the FedEx guy like literally lugs that beer up 3 flights of stairs to put it at my door. He is a saint.
Yeah, see, but here in Idaho, I can have ammo shipped directly to my doorstep, and then that poor FedEx driver is having to deal with 50-pound
Oh, good
boxes.
night. Have you heard about Colorado's new gun law?
Oh man, it's like you guys are getting basically anything that has semi-automatic. Like, so you guys are gonna basically go down to revolvers, right?
Yeah, no detachable magazines.
Yeah.
There's so like think of all the weapons, the firearms that have detachable magazines.
An M1 Garand.
Literally,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, and um, like you have to. So now they've got another new class that you have to take, and you've got to get another. It's not just a background check for the feds. You've got to get a background check from your local sheriff, and and here's my problem with it because there's all kinds of people who you know gun guys, gun gals that they're like that's their hobby, and they've got consumable income or
Well, like
expendable
the
income.
hunting community, you kind of want to have a couple of rounds. Like, even if it's a 308, it's a long range bolt action rifle that is specifically for hunting elk, hunting deer. You are limiting their capacity to potentially put food in their family's freezer.
Yeah, and if you're a sheep rancher and you're killing coyotes
Yup.
and uh and I mean I always go back to it's like um if if you have to think about somebody's grandmother who's a widow and living all by herself in a house that has all these unbelievably expensive antiques, and the likelihood of a home invasion robbery for that woman is pretty high, I would say, pretty high. And there's that woman is not going to be able to operate a bolt action rifle. She's um, and even it's like, oh, okay, well now you've got to go to this training, and You've got to have range time, and don't get me wrong. I think training is great. I think
100%.
range time is great. And I think that anybody who can, afford training should take training, and you should have continuous training. And there's probably nothing more important for personal defense than range time. Actually shooting the firearm, from the way that you carry the firearm. Um, but but that's not what the Constitution says,
No, it's
and
you have the ability to defend yourself, and the whole point of the freedom of firearms is for a tyrannical government. And we don't even like. I think that when people hear that kind of argument, and especially when you are a pretty extreme to a like guns are my personality kind of nutter dude, I think a lot of people really are inferring in your message that you think the American government is going to be tyrannical against you and you're going to go against the tyrannical government. And I just do not believe in the practicality of that whatsoever, because you're going to lose. You will lose 100% of the time. But what a tyrannical government could look like is Russia invading the United States, but Russia's not going to do that because all of the citizens are armed. And that's the reason why invading Ukraine has been much more than 2 weeks, is because they weren't expecting the people that were going to defend themselves, because it's a much bigger argument for you to tell me to get out of my house than it is for me to let you in my house. Um,
Yeah, I think it's important to, remember that, we've only been on the world stage for 250 years.
mhm.
And we're really, 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 really fortunate that there hasn't been, significant warfare on our land. But I've talked about it, very frequently. Um, the opening up of the Arctic Ocean changes the geopolitical game um, greatly.
Well, and
And
even in a practical setting, like you just mentioned, like the hypothetical situation of the 80-year-old grandma. But as you said that, it reminded me of this story that happened here in Idaho last year. And this is one of the funniest things, in my opinion, of the justification of why people need to have these. And this is on ABC News. 85-year-old Idaho woman hailed as hero in fatal shooting of home invasion suspect. An 85-year-old Idaho woman is being hailed as a hero for gunning down a home invasion suspect with a handgun she kept under her pillow after he allegedly handcuffed her to a chair, pistol whipped her, and threatened numerous times to kill her. Christine Ginahine survived the harrowing incident at her home near Blackfoot, Idaho, after being shot multiple times by an alleged assailant, 39 years old Derek Condon, who died in her kitchen when the octogenarian turned the tables on him and shot him twice with her 357 Magnum. She told investigators she decided to use deadly force to protect her and her disabled son, saying it was now or never, as she feared the suspect was otherwise going to kill her. And that's a real story of a dude my age being the biggest asshole imaginable and taking advantage of a little old lady. But that lady had an equalizer. And this is Brad's always been into jujitsu. Brad's brother Brad has always been into being able to defend himself in that way. I have personally always been a very, very small statured person, and I know I'm going to lose those fights. Doesn't mean I'm not going to defend myself.
yeah, while you were talking that, I'm just like, what a horrifying experience for that woman.
Right.
And then you mentioned her son. Um, and can you imagine the psychological challenges that person was going through, probably feeling like they were failing in protecting their mother?
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's just nothing about that story is good except for the shooter. The bad guy died. That's the only good
Yeah.
thing about that story.
And I think that that's something that I wish more people on the left would understand is when a bad guy makes a bad decision and a bad guy dies, that is a good day. When the good guys are alive and the bad guys aren't, that's a good day.
Yeah,
Um,
and
it's a
you know, there, but
horribly
that
unfortunate. Oh, go ahead.
I just that's whenever I think of gun laws, those are the people that I think of, and you know um, uh, the single person who's working as a server at a restaurant or a bar or a barista or whatever, and they don't have a whole lot of money, but they live downtown and there's a lot of crime downtown. Um, those are the people that really need access to firearms and for personal protection purposes, not for collection, not for fun, not for and all those other reasons. I mean, having a rifle for fun is perfectly
Fun.
acceptable, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've got friends who have literally hundreds of firearms because that's like their hobby, you know. And and I mean, if somebody were to, just say, oh, I got like 135 guns and I keep, 10,000 rounds of 9 mil and 15,000 rounds of 5.56 in my garage, I would not think twice about it. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's
Sounds like grandpa.
yeah, it
Yeah.
totally makes sense to me. There's and
Now, are you going to use all of those at the same time? No, probably not. But do you use them individually the way that you enjoy them? Yeah, because a 22 is fun in the way that a 22 is fun, and an AR is fun in the way that an AR is fun. And a shotgun is fun in the way that a shotgun is fun.
And it's just like hunting and filling your freezer with deer and elk meat and filling your freezer with fish and instead of going to the store and buying a steak, you go to the slaughterhouse and you buy half a beef and
Yeah.
you fill your freezer with beef. And that way you're inoculating yourself from the fluctuations of the market. Um,
I've probably never told you this story. So I was talking with mom once, and it was shortly after a one of the unfortunate incidents that happens in America far too frequently. And she had asked me, she's like, I don't understand why anyone would ever need to own an AR. And she didn't know I had one. And I was like, Mom, do you want to find out? Because I'll go out and show you why, and like we can make it completely safe, and you can get an understanding of what it is. And one of my favorite pictures that I've taken of mom is her shooting my AR, and it's like it's a fun little AR. It's a double stamp. It's an SBR. It's got a suppressor on it. It's pretty fun. And I get it all set up with her. I put a single round in, and I'm like, you just gotta expect, you're used to snap, and this is going to be cuckoo. It's just going to be a little bit more. You're going to feel it, but I don't want you to freak out. So we're just going to put one round in here, and you're going to send it down range. Doesn't matter where it goes, doesn't matter if it hits. Just want you to get kind of familiarized with it, and then you can feel and experience what that is. And she's all up on it, and she fires, and then because of like how concussive it is, she just kind of tenses up like this, and she holds it for a second, and then she's like, okay, can I do that a couple more times? And it was awesome. And then meanwhile, Haley doesn't like that one because it's too much of a concussive wave. So I've got my suppressed AR 1522, and it's like kerplink, 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 kerplink. Literally, all you hear is just the steel target downrange, and me laughing because she's just nail driving over and over and over again. And I'm like, you're good at this. You've never been interested in it, but you're good at this. And it's kind of a fun thing. And there's this dopamine hit when I'm not listening to the firearm, but I hear ting, ting, shit, ting, yes.
it's so funny. I remember when I bought your mother a taser, and the reason I bought her a taser is because I wanted to buy her a firearm. I wanted to buy her a pistol. But I was like, I was talking with her and I was like, you're not going to shoot anybody. There's, I mean, it's like there's,
She's too kind.
yeah, that's
She's way
exactly
too
right.
kind.
She's too kind. There, she would try and talk the person out of, and this was after you guys were older. I mean, I think she would probably shoot somebody to defend you, but I
Hmm.
don't think that she would shoot somebody to defend herself. Um,
I,
so I,
I I agree with that. Yeah.
so that's why I bought her the taser because I was like, uh, I think she would tase somebody
You know,
probably a couple times too.
there was there was a time that I was talking to somebody, and it was during so when all of the protests that were going on with George Floyd, there was a lot of local businesses that were getting vandalized, and I understand why. I'm not gonna make any judgments on that, but I was making sure, like, hey, if somebody wants to come and do that to me, I'm not gonna go out patrol the streets, but I've built something and I'm not gonna let that be taken away whatsoever. And it was a really weird conversation that I was having with a couple of people because I had never been one to appendix carry. And, typically I off body carry, or I will just have knives, and I have like, I've got a nice collection of whichever ones I want, and they're rapidly deployable, and it's I have other things, but I never really felt like I needed to have a firearm on me. And I had during that time there was a lot of unrest and there was a lot of tension, and especially in a city like Boise, where you have so much of one community surrounding a different community, and it comes to a head a little bit differently. Um, and I was talking to a client about, I understand when parents get to that point where they feel like I need to defend something. My child is my legacy, and I want to make sure that my child is protected. And for me, it was my business. And I think that people will have a moment where they realize that they're capable of something, and they will either be empowered by that, emboldened by it, or afraid of it. And I think that a lot of people that are afraid of what that power can be are justifiably worried about what the mental consequences of having to use that responsibility is. Because, regardless of if you're justified in a situation, you just had a bad day. Like that 85-year-old woman, regardless of the fact that she walked away, she had a bad day. She had a really bad day.
Yeah, and
Um,
her son, and
it's always a tragedy, and
yeah,
no matter what happens, and you're a part of that tragedy. And that's kind of the view that I think that people who are afraid of that power is they recognize what the implications of that can be, and they just don't want to be a part of that. The people who are emboldened by it, I look at those as like the people who, open carry everywhere. They've got protected by Glock on the back of their truck, and they turn it into this personality that it doesn't need to be. Like, you don't need to virtue signal which firearm you like.
yeah, and it's kind of defeats the purpose of carrying concealed if you've got it protected by Glock's bumper
Right.
sticker.
Right. Like, and that's one of the things about being empowered by it. So I actually do feel empowered by it. I know that, okay, if the worst case scenario happens, I have an equalizer, and I do the training that I need to know that I can utilize that to be what it needs to be. But I also know that that's not my goal. My goal is to get the hell out of that situation. And the only reason that it exists is if something wants to get in the way of me, my wife, and my exit.
Yeah, and there's it's so funny because you know it's the gun law the governor signed, I think it might have been day before yesterday, um, here in Colorado. It will do absolutely nothing to make anyone more safe from criminal attack,
It
and it has no uh, no impact whatsoever on the availability of firearms to criminals who don't care. But I mean, the people that I know that that use guns for self defense, they're that way. And it's like I see guys on, there's videos on YouTube of somebody in a road rage incident, and they like pull out their firearm on somebody for who I'm like, no. There's I mean, so I get that there's people who don't think that that's uh you know that it's important to use judgment, not just about um uh, you know, training and preparation, but knowing that the objective is not to kill anybody.
It's to stop
I
the
mean, you
threat.
might have to kill somebody. You might have to kill somebody. And if you're gonna shoot them, don't shoot them. Don't try and kneecap anybody, because that's exactly right. Center of mass. Center
Or
of mass.
mass.
Because I mean, you're no matter how much you train at the range. Oh, well, this isn't true there, but I mean, so there is a certain uh, numbness to the humanity of it that comes both for people who uh, are in extended combat situations and cops. Cops in places where it's not uncommon, even if they're not shooting people, they're seeing people who are shot every day.
They're exposed to it a lot more, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So
Um,
there's kind of a numbness. We were talking about, it's a moral pain that people suffer when they, like, I imagine that woman, that 85-year-old woman, I would imagine that she's suffering from a moral injury. Um, and uh, and I don't want to belittle that for soldiers and cops as well, because soldiers and cops very much. I mean, they might uh,
I see plenty of
be
cop video,
have a
like
great.
body cam footage of cops reacting to what they just do, and they go into shock. To say that, every single cop is going to be as numb as the 20-year veteran, probably not the case, especially if it's some guy fresh out of college.
Yeah. So and particularly, when you if you shoot somebody and you weren't certain as to whether or not it was a good shot or whatever, meaning it was a good moral shot, then you can have a moral injury uh, that that sticks with you for a very long time.
So this is actually a really interesting topic that I don't know if you have heard anything about. Did you hear about the news last week in Pocatello of the 17-year-old kid who was shot?
Nope, nope,
This
I
is
did
a
not.
um, this is a really unfortunate situation that today made another really unfortunate turn. So there was a police interaction, Pocatello, Idaho, earlier this last week. And this kid, Victor Perez, 17, he's a nonverbal autistic kid. And police misunderstood the situation and they shot this kid. He's been in critical condition for the last week, and his family announced a few days ago that he was brain dead and on life support. And today they took him off of life support, which is really like, this is the story that's been going around Boise. Is this is one of the most horrific police responses I think I have ever seen locally in a community. And this poor kid's family is just devastated, just absolutely devastated. And especially considering the fact that there was no reason, like, you can look up the body cam footage and there was no reason whatsoever that this should have happened. And the police are on administrative leave right now, which I hope they don't get a blue loophole and it's just an administrative leave. I really want justice to happen. Um, However, saying that, believing that, I can't imagine that those cops aren't beating the shit out of themselves mentally. Because I would imagine that them recognizing what they've done, the gravity of what's happened, and especially after today, that is a an anguish that if you are a decent human will not go away. Like that you'll live with that.
Yeah, there's we had a similar situation happen here in Colorado where uh, a uh, uh, a kid didn't they didn't specify what type of mental illness he had, but he had a serious mental illness of some kind, and he got in a car wreck, and he was freaked out that he got in this car wreck, so he called 911, and he said, "Hey, I got in a car." So he reported, "Hey, I got a car wreck, and I need you to send cops, but I'm scared, so I'm staying in the car and all this stuff." So the cops showed up, and so the kid is in the car, uh, and as long as he stays in the car, there's no way he can hurt anybody except for himself, right? But they just they just kept hammering him and hammering him and hammering him, and uh, and they finally they broke into the car, and he reached for a knife when they broke in the car, and they shot him. They shot him dead, and it got ruled as a good shoot. But and it was a good shoot because at the
Because he
very
was
very
reaching
end,
for a knife.
yeah, there's at the very, but it's like there was no reason to go in that car.
Yeah,
There was no,
and were you guys within a lunge range? Like, were you actually in immediate danger?
yeah, so there's but then you have to, that you have to look at the cops. It's like, oh, you know what? I'm not going to wait until, this, and give this person a potential upper hand,
Yeah.
because there's no such thing as a fair gunfight, and the only good gunfight is the one you walk away from.
Yep. And
So
if somebody else shoots first, they already have the advantage.
yeah, so there's it's right, and it actually led to one of the, and if you know people who advocate for these kinds of things, one of the things that they did is there's several law enforcement agencies that have a blue envelope policy. So
Mm-mm.
what it is you can get a blue envelope for free from the police. You just go to the website, ask for a blue envelope, they'll send you a blue envelope. And what you do is you write down what um, your mental health circumstances are inside that blue envelope. And if you have an encounter with law enforcement, show them the blue envelope, and they'll take the blue envelope, and uh, and at least they'll have that information. So they're not, it's obviously it's not a don't you can't hide behind it, because a bullet will go straight through the blue envelope.
But
But
it's a way of saying like, hey, it's not a white flag. You guys are the thin blue line. This is your color. Come take this because this has a lot of information that's relevant to your job. Um,
and it also, it's a good tangible reminder for the officer that, oh, okay, we've got more resources available to us than just the gun that's on my hip.
yeah.
There's mental, there's, I don't know if you guys have them, but we have uh uh you know licensed mental health clinicians
Mhm.
that are on response teams.
So
Um,
this is when the George Floyd protests and there's a lot of BLM versus BPD protests that were going on downtown, and there was the big sentiment of defund the police. Um, Daniel obviously is a very good friend that I've known for a very long time, and he is as red, white, and blue as I can imagine anyone to be. Like this guy has served in the military and now he's in law enforcement, and he really is my reason that I cannot get behind the ACAB movement. I will advocate for MCAB. Most cops are bastards, but not all cops are bastards. And he is the example that I actually gave people when they're saying like defund them. Like, no, give them more money, give them way more money, give them way more training, give them way more resources, and make them what you need them to be. And he was actually one of the very first police officers that Boise implemented, where his partner is a social worker. And they have known cases that they go throughout in the town. So that way, when dispatch gets a call about XYZ, instead of them sending some random cop who doesn't know the situation and will, potentially take a half an hour and escalate a situation to a place that it doesn't need to be, which can waste resources and create a bad experience for the community, Daniel goes with a social worker who knows the issue and has the resources to actually take care of someone in crisis. And then it's like a 10-minute situation to calm the person down, and it's building relationships with the community. That's what funding cops will actually look like. And that's the type of policing that I can absolutely get behind and support.
Yeah, and the most important thing that a cop does every day that they work is go home.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm the same way. I see a lot of unnecessary use of force, and I wish it wasn't that way. But you can't tell people to, well, wait until. In actuality, there's not recently, but there. I mean, a lot of times cops have less restrictive use of force rules than soldiers deployed. Um,
Because
uh,
there's not rules of engagement. Hey, there's a real life situation and we want to protect our cops.
yeah, yeah. So there's so it's one of the things that cops need to be able to do what they do, um, and there's it's it's kind of unfortunate that there are legal loopholes, but I think a lot of that's changing. And in
For
fact,
being able to like obtain firearms or for cops?
so like the police chief here in Boulder. This is kind of funny. Um, uh, there's a funny, but there's so he was. I think his name was Elijah Gray. I'm not sure. I might be wrong, but there was a guy down in Aurora, Colorado, a young black kid, um, and somebody called the cops on a suspicious person. And the suspicious person was the person was walking while they were black. That's the only thing they were doing is they were walking around while they were black. So somebody called the cops, and the cops showed up and ended up shooting the kid. Um, and uh, the police captain who responded um, went and updated the dispatch code so that rather than being a suspicious persons call, it was a reaching for a cop's gun. So he changed it, and and then later, once the body cam footage came out and the whole thing was, they ended up in court. That same captain testified against the cops that he, I would say, apparently tried to protect by changing that code. Because see, here's the deal: if somebody is responding to a call and the dispatch code is suspicious person, that's not a crime.
Nope.
There's It's not a
I'm a
crime.
suspicious person.
Yeah, there's so you would expect a responding officer to a suspicious person call to, hey, who are you? What are you doing here? We had a call, and just ascertain what is the person doing there. Are they committing a crime? And if they're not committing a crime, sorry for the hassle. Move out on your way. Um, that's what you would expect. But if someone was just dispatched uh, to a to respond to a scene where the perpetrator has reached for the firearm of a fellow officer. I'm showing up and I'm bursting out of that car, and I'm going to be ready to shoot whoever is the person that's doing that.
But also, there better already be a cop that looks like they're in distress when you show up. Otherwise, that's a lot of bullshit.
Yeah, but what ended up happening was the guy who was the captain on duty changed the code. So if you were looking at the circumstance, you would think that the cops were showing up to a violent call and that's why they shot this guy.
Yeah.
But they weren't. So anyway, so the cops that did it, they were convicted. And
Good.
but the captain who changed covered it up, changed the dispatch code, is now the chief of police here in Boulder. There's and the Boulder NAACP has been freaking out about it ever since he got here. They've just been
That is a blatant abuse of power.
yeah, his defense is that was standard procedure. That if the captain on duty responded to the call and they thought that the dispatch code was wrong, they would change the dispatch code. But
Are there breadcrumbs that show when he changed the dispatch code?
yeah, and he testified to it. So it's not a secret at all that he did it. But what I can't believe is nobody asks that question. It's like, well, even if that is your standard operating procedure, don't you think maybe that's a bad standard operating?
Terrible procedure.
Yeah, because I mean, when I'm investigating something, one of the things that I want to know is when did they know what they knew? Did they know what they should have known? And if they did, when did they know it? So, and that's why I mentioned that, so I would expect, somebody showing up to a suspicious person call, to not have the hairs on the back of their neck up, to not be responding in a, I'm ready to, rock and roll kind of a mode. But I would expect that if someone was responding to a call, and like you mentioned, you would want to see another officer there, but there's always so much fog inside those kinds of circumstances. So you're still, I mean, if you showed up, it would be way more easy for me to understand cops showing up and shooting this kid if he had actually was doing anything violent.
Right.
But he was literally just walking around. He didn't have a firearm. He was completely unarmed, was just a young black kid walking in the neighborhood.
When I visited you in Boulder a few years ago, it was a very, like, obviously for anyone who knows what Idaho is, it's a very different experience. And I remember we'd had this conversation on the sixth episode that never actually aired because we did the 6.5 episode instead. But there was the gun range, or not the gun range, but the gun store. And you were like, oh man, in Idaho, you've got a gun store in every corner. We have one. We have just one. Do you want to go check it out? And for me, like, okay, what kind of gun store do you want to go to? Do you want to go to the modern gun store? Do you want to go to the tactical gun store? Do you want to go to the good old boy gun store? Do you want to go to the pawn shop? Do you want to go to the one where you can get the weird stuff that I kind of like? Do you want to go to the one that's established? It's been around for like 30 years. And like, there's so much variety. And you have the good old boy shop. That's it. You just have the dudes that are like, we're here because if we're not here, no one else will do it, and we got to defend the ability for us to exist.
Didn't they get you a target of a dinosaur?
You got me a steel target dinosaur. Which that's what Haley shoots with her suppressed 22. But going in there, looking as I do, I don't really fit in the good old boy shops, which is why I don't typically go to them in Idaho. And I just wanted to show you the gun that I was planning on buying, which was the SIG 365, because they had just come out super, super compact. I was looking at getting one of their SAS models, which are weird, and I'm really regretting that I ever bought it and I sold it instead. But the guys were just staring at me the entire time that I'm in the shop, and it wasn't until you said, "Oh, it's okay, he's from Idaho," that they all had kind of this sigh of relief. And then they just started having the conversation. They're like, "Oh, lucky you get all the fun."
It's
But
so funny how it's okay. He's from Idaho.
yeah, it's like, it's cool. I'm one of you guys. It's fine. I know. I look like all the weird liberals, but trust me, I like guns, and I think that the gays and the blacks and the women should all defend themselves with them. Like that's where I'm at on the aisle. Uh, and but when you're walking around in Boulder, it is such a different mentality. Like there is a tension around firearms, and I think that it's largely because there's such a lack of understanding of them. And for me, I think that you guys were smart with the way that you raised us, because we were involved with like the Boy Scouts, and we did like NRA shooting stuff, and I was exposed to it. But I've always kind of had this mentality that, yeah, we all have the Second Amendment, and there might be some checks and balances that should go in there. Like me personally, I don't think that a regulation on if there's a magazine, or the capacity of the magazine, or the ability to have a hollow point or a subsonic round, like I don't think any of that stuff is really the core issue that you need to potentially regulate. I think you just need to make sure, do you have enough competency to not use this on a living thing unless you're getting food or that thing is going to kill you? If you can demonstrate those competencies, I don't care what you get. Like, if you are some historian that wants to buy a cannon and put it out in front of your house, I don't care. If you are a billionaire and you want to buy all of the things that the military has, like the new Sig Fury round, which is I think like $3 per round. All right, like that's your money. As long as you're not gonna be using that to harm people, but you're like extra concerned for people harming you, whatever. I really do not care, because at the end of the day, you're demonstrating the only core competency that I care about, and that's not you're not actively going out trying to harm people.
See, and I mean, I guess one of the things that I look at is like uh, the compound that David Koresh was leading in Waco, Texas. And
Mm-hmm.
those people had all kinds of guns, and they had a range, and they were stockpiling firearms, they were stockpiling ammunition, and and uh, and and there ended up being this huge gunfight, and we ended up burning all those children to their death, uh, because we couldn't just let somebody do what is a little creepy and weird, but they were it's not like they were stockpiling those weapons so that they could attack the city of Waco.
No.
They were stockpiling them because they thought that the government was going to attack them, which they did.
I'm surprised. Yeah, they were justified in their concern.
you know and so it's like there's the reason that someone has a firearm, I think, is their own gig. And I it's the same. I and this is a very, very big difference. There's your grandma Pat used to there'd be some hate speech, and like when Governor Wallace was shot, and his campaign was a very um, very white separatist campaign, and she would get very, very angry, but then when he was shot, she was like, I can't believe that they shot him just because he was saying things. There's that the having horrible ideas and hateful ideas about other people is just, I mean, that's part of the responsibility of free speech.
You
You
know
just
that
got
was
to realize that um, when and this is this is a great this is a great Christian ideal in that 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 the Christian notion is that you know everybody gets uh, to do with God what they choose. God doesn't like waterboard people, and or he didn't if you're a creationist, he didn't make people so that they don't have free will. Because if you think about it, I mean, if people were made, if we were designed without a free will, and the only thing that we could do was was do good things, we could that's all we had the capacity to do. There would be no evil in the world, but there would also be no no
there'd be no comparison of hatred to understand what joy is.
and
And
compassion
yeah,
and all those things that make humans uniquely human. There's
well, it's like that scene in The Matrix when Neo is talking to the architect, and he talks about how he had created the original version of the Matrix was a utopia, and they lost millions of crops of people because people rejected it because they wanted to be able to make decisions for themselves. And that movie has been done so many times in so many ways, but I remember you taking me to the Matrix. That was the first rated R movie you ever took me to when we were living in Hawaii. And I remember us leaving the theater and having philosophical conversations about what is the Matrix. And I think that it has such a good religious analog to it in regards to free will of people.
Yeah, I agree. I remember that. I remember those conversations as well, and it was um, yeah, and that's Elon Musk. I took a screenshot of it. He posted on Twitter, and he's actually posted it multiple times that he thinks that biology is just a pathway to digital superintelligence,
Mm-hmm.
and that so humanity isn't and this I mean this is how I think most religions would look at it is most religions have some kind of a creation story, um, and in most religions, humans are kind of the top of creation, right? So humanity is a level above the beasts and the beasts of burden. That's why we eat animals, and that's why we keep animals as pets, because there's this hierarchy, and that notion that humans are just like cannon fodder. They're the people. They're the people in the pods in the Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
Um, losing crops of human beings. Um, and we had that. Was it the ectogenesis episode that we didn't actually do?
No, we did the ectogenesis episode, but did you listen to the interview that Rogan did with the CEO of Colossal?
No.
Oh man, he definitely he mentions, he doesn't say it by name, but he does mention the process of it. So did you hear about the dire wolves?
Yes.
Okay, so did you hear last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, about the woolly mice?
I didn't hear about the woolly mice, but there's I definitely heard about the wolves. I had a conversation with a guy at my catechist class last week.
So I I think that this is a really, really interesting conversation, and I'm gonna send you something on the woolly mice that you can look up while I'm explaining this. So I think it's an interesting philosophical conversation of whether or not um, is it an actual dire wolf?
I
And
did see this.
the woolly mice, yeah.
Yeah, I did see this.
Okay, so this is all connected, and this is the thing that I've been talking about in the barbershop for the last week because I think this is one of the greatest philosophical and scientific conversations of our time right now is it actually de-extincting something, or is it, creating something that resembles something that it once was? Is it Jurassic Park? What is this? And the co-founder CEO, his stance is, if you're watching the movie Jurassic Park, what is the movie Jurassic Park about in one word? Not a rhetorical question.
Um, hmm. There's survival.
You're wrong. It's dinosaurs.
Oh, okay.
It's dinosaurs. Trying to get some philosophical answer for what's Jurassic Park about. It's dinosaurs.
But the dinosaurs were trying to kill him, and all they were trying to do was stay alive.
Fair. Fair. There's a survival aspect to the movie about dinosaurs. So he talks about if you look at what those scientists were doing, they were tinkering the exact same way that Colossal did. They interjected amphibian DNA to create something. So was it a dinosaur or was it functionally a dinosaur? So what they've created is functionally a direwolf. And functionally, this is what existed. Now, the classification and the labeling of species, and is it a canid or canid, that's a human concept. That's something that we have done. But 10,000 years ago, there were no specifications. So if we're looking at the markers that were present in DNA, are we functionally bringing back something that was functionally present at that time based off of the genetics of the closest living animal? So I've been following this company for a couple of years, and I've known about them because they have been wanting to bring back the woolly mammoth. And this is something that I've been following because as we're talking about the Arctic shelves melting, in the last few years, there has been a paleontological gold rush in northern territories, the Yukon, and specifically areas around Siberia, because you have all of these caves that have been completely frozen that are now thawing out, and you have an immense amount of DNA that has been very, very well preserved. And over the last year of different articles that I've been reading, scientists talk about how you go into these caves that are thawing out and it smells like rotting flesh because of how well things have been preserved, that it's like it's still present in the air. So they've been working on the dire wolves for a little bit of time, but they're using CRISPR technology to be able to make these changes. And the way that scientists have been using CRISPR to make any kind of genetic modification to an organism or organics, GMO. So this is, for all the liberals, this is a GMO direwolf, so you're probably not going to adopt one. And the process has typically been a slow process because science needs to be slow. So they will make one genetic edit to a species, and then its lineage will go on, and then the second generation will get a second edit, and then the third generation will get a third edit, and so on and so on and so on. And this is how a lot of lab mice get their genetics tested or changed over for various experiments that happen. So the woolly mice is one of the lab experiments that they tested prior to the dire wolves. And essentially what it is was they took all this genetic code that is fossilized, and then they grabbed the closest living relative in the thing that they're trying to work on, and they use artificial intelligence and the power of computing that we now have to be able to figure out, okay, if this was 50,000 years ago and this is today, what was the pathway that walked to get it to that point, and how can we fill in those gaps? But also, how can we make all those changes in a single batch? And that's the tricky part, because if one letter of a single strand of DNA is wrong, you might be telling that mouse that it needs to be having a wing, so its arm is going to get deformed and it's going to live with immense pain. And now you're going to need to put that down as a measure of compassion. So doing these big batches and being like, okay, we're gonna tinker and do this, be birthed. It was risky. So these woolly mice,
It's a young Frankenstein thing.
yeah, yeah, with lovely knockers. uh, so the woolly mice was the first experiment that they had where they took all of the batches that they wanted from the woolly mammoth that basically indicated hair growth, length of hair, texture of hair, and the fluffiness of it, and also the scale of what that would have been based on the size of the animal itself, and did it in a single batch from the parent's embryo into the fertilized egg that it becomes what it is. So the woolly mouse was proof of concept that you can do batches. The dire wolves were ultimately a cool thing that they were working with the an indigenous group of people in northern United States. And because George R. R. Martin is an investor in Colossal, it became a really good marketing opportunity for this company to get known, as was Peter Jackson. And Peter Jackson, to me, like that was actually a really interesting thing to learn that he was an investor, because he came out with a movie a couple of years ago called They Shall Not Grow Old. And this is one of the most fascinating things that Peter Jackson, who's the director of the Lord of the Rings movies, he's very interested in preserving the past. So this movie, They Shall Not Grow Old, was him working with the Royal British Archives to get archived World War One footage. And he scanned every single frame and was able to use AI to not only restore it to a 4K size that it could be displayed, but he colorized it and he was able to restore all of the audio from that film as well. So now these stories of World War One soldiers in the middle of their battles can actually be seen. There's a showing of it a couple of years ago that Haley and I went to, and it was fascinating because Haley and I were the youngest people in the theater. It's just a bunch of old people probably learning about their family members and World War One. But Peter Jackson was very, very interested in the preservation of the past. Colossal is very interested in the preservation of the past and conservation of animals. But all of this comes back to the woolly mammoth and ectogenesis. So the woolly mammoth, one of the reasons that they're wanting to rewild this animal is because of the temperature changes of the planet. And you have all of this area that has tundra and permafrost, and like the time that we've lived in Alaska, we know what that does. It doesn't make for very fertile land whatsoever. But imagine having herds of multi-ton animals that are moving the earth, adding nitrates into the soil as they're consuming food and leaving their droppings, and tilling it up. And because of the nitrates going back in, helping balance the temperature and regulate, and over a couple of generations, you can have workable soil that could actually become farmland for future generations. So if you wind up taking the closest living or animal, which is the Asian elephant, which already has a lot of those genetic markers that indicate that there'll be fur or like extended hair, then you'll be able to do exactly that. However, the woolly mammoth was larger, so can those mothers actually give birth to something that would be larger than themselves? And that's where ectogenesis can actually come in. So all the images that we saw were lambs. And it's a fertilized egg that was just put into this synthetic womb with synthetic amniotic fluid. But if you're trying to conserve species and all you need is the parent to be a donor of the eggs, and you can do everything in vitro fertilization, well, now you can actually reintroduce animals at an amazing rate if the governments accept it. But they're working with Australia to try and bring back the Tasmanian tiger. There's a lot of conservation efforts that they're working with. And most of the software that they're providing is free software to anyone using it for conservation efforts, which is phenomenal. Like for the Endangered Species Act and all of the animals that are at risk of dying because of any number of reasons, we could potentially reverse that. And ectogenesis could be one of the things that allows it to happen.
Yeah, there's I mean, I'm one of those people that as far as like conservation, I think there's a difference between conservation and resurrection. So, if there's a species that is dying off because of some circumstance, and we can save that species, I think we should do everything we can to save that species. But if the species is dying out because of a change in their habitat, and that change in their habitat isn't going to go away, then the process of extinction is part of selection. It's what
Mm-hmm.
it's what's and you know we're upset about animals that have gone extinct since we started counting animals and categorizing them and knowing what they are. But animals have gone extinct for throughout history.
Yeah, there's been
Um,
six or seven major extinction events.
Yeah, so that's there. So I think there's a difference, and I think that to a certain extent, trying to bring back the Tasmanian tiger, trying to bring back the woolly mammoth, I think these are nostalgic ideas. So we're doing it because we want to honor the past. We want to, but but I'm not. Can you hear
What's
that?
going on out there? Is there a party?
I don't know.
We're celebrating. 420 is another week out.
There's yeah, I don't
You
know what it
silly
is, man.
Colorado folk.
I'm like, what on earth is going on? Somebody was singing. There's about some I don't know what they were singing, but they're singing. And it could be there are kids in this apartment complex.
Oh, you
So
mean
it
there's
could
people
be
other
that
than you?
say again?
There's people other than you?
Yeah. and and they may be getting ready for an Easter recital
Oh, yeah.
or some such thing. Um
Now,
and because that's not a normal thing. I don't normally hear people sing.
circling back, I agree with you that I do think that there is a difference between conserving and resurrecting. In his interview, he actually mentioned something kind of interesting about the Tasmanian tiger because there was nothing that actually changed about the environment. That was humans that killed it. And it's one of the reasons that they're working with the Australian government is what was interesting to their ecosystem was the Tasmanian tiger was the perfect predator for certain prey. And because it's extinct, those prey have become a nuisance on the island continent. And the way that the residents of the island continent tried to initially deal with it was house cats. And if anybody knows anything about house cats, if you let a house cat be outside, it will decimate cats, squirrels, chipmunks, rodents. It will destroy so much of an ecosystem. And now Australia has a very real feral house cat problem. And a lot of Australians hate house cats because there's so many that are feral that are destroying the ecosystem. And the idea is if they were to bring back the Tasmanian tiger, it would be one step above the house cat on the food chain. And it could bring balance back to the way that it was before humans made the mistake of interfering with what natural selection was.
Yeah,
Um,
and the American bison is another good
a
example.
great example because we just wanted to get rid of food supply for a people that we didn't want to have
I
here.
know
So we
there's
decimated
nobody.
bison.
Everybody's like, oh man, it was over hunting and there was all this stuff. It's like, no, we wanted to starve
We
out the
starved
natives.
nations of peoples
So we killed all these animals and just stacked up the carcasses.
and did nothing. It was mindless killing for the sake of killing.
Yeah, yeah. So there is it's one of the most horrific tales of in American history, but it's what happened, you know.
Basically anything involving the settlers coming to Americas and the people who were here first, probably not the most pleasant part of our history.
Yeah, but there's I mean, I don't necessarily have a whole lot of conqueror's guilt, um, because I think the world is much better because of what the American continents have become
I
compared to what they were.
I wouldn't necessarily phrase it that way, I don't think. I agree and I understand where you're coming from. This is one of the things Haley and I had a conversation years ago of, there was a conversation that was talking about reparations. And I could say if there was a way that you as an individual could find and directly relate that my great 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 granddaddy owned your great 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 granddaddy, you have a really solid argument, man. You have a very solid argument, and I'm going to listen to you, and we're going to have a conversation about it because the likelihood of that descendant finding me is probably not going to happen. I don't have guilt for things that I had no responsibility for and that I was not a part of. And this was. I remember one of the first times that we had this conversation was when I was getting my 23andMe, and I texted you like I'm looking at the message that says knowledge is irrevocable. And once you know, you can't unknow. Are you sure you want to continue? I'm like, well, yeah, duh. Continue. And then an even bigger, redder box. Are you sure you want to know what your health history is? This can cause like an amount of anxiety because you will know things. So I texted you. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, hey, what kind of cancer am I going to die from? And I just asked, is there anything in our background we need to know? And you're like, nope, we came from a race of conquerors. We're good. We're fine. I'm like, not what I meant at all. But I get it. I was talking about my dementia issues, but yeah, that's cool. But yeah, I do agree. I do ultimately, if you look at the world in the 1400s, the world in the 1600s, the world in the 1800s, and the world now, it is upward trajectory on who is doing better. And that's one of the interesting things, like listening to Bill Maher last night, he was talking about what a lot of Americans don't actually understand is that Alabama, with the education and poverty of Alabama, is a richer state than France. So like even in our worst situations, we're doing a whole lot better than other people, and we're certainly doing a whole hell of a lot better than my great 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 granddaddy.
Yeah, yeah. There's so I don't know, but I do think that. Oh, it's interesting that you mentioned reparations because every time I think of reparations, the thing that I always go to is Alaska, because I think Alaska did the right thing as
Famous
far as
stipends.
reparations, because when the state started getting all the revenue from the Alaska pipeline. And so if anybody doesn't know, if you live in Alaska, there's no income tax. They have this big permanent fund that is all the money they got from the oil companies uh, paying for the right of way to use Alaska land for the pipeline. So they got all this money. They just got like a ton of money. and they created this big permanent fund, and that investment fund is what funds the operations of the state. And every year, at least when I was up there, every year um, the fund generates more money than it requires to operate the state. So people get a dividend check. So at
Hmm.
the end of the year, instead of paying your taxes, you get paid money for living in Alaska. But one of the things that they did at that same time is they went to the native nations of Alaska, um, who had a very different history than the native nations in the contiguous United States.
Very different.
But it was still kind of bogus because like we bought Alaska from Russia, and Russia went over there and like this is our land, and but there was never any like tender exchange between the Russians and the natives. There was never any tender exchange between the United States and the natives, so it was still kind of a it was a with the land was very much taken from them without any compensation. But it's not like, well, while we did that, we also destroyed you and killed off most of your young people, and um, so it's a different story. But what Alaska did is they got the native nations together, and they formed what's called the Alaska Native Corporation, and they paid them. They were like, here's what we think we would have paid for your land in today's dollars. We got this big windfall from the Alaska pipeline. Here's your money. Um, so now that Alaska Native Corporation uh, has a fund just like that permanent fund, and they use it to fund operations on in the villages and to better the education and treatment programs, provide medical care for natives. But they're the same. They normally don't spend as much money as the fund makes. So if you're an Alaskan native, you get two checks. You get one check from the
From the state and then one from the native corporation.
but what I think is really good about the way that they did that is they didn't just willy-nilly distribute those funds out in a one-time paying the people of one generation, so that one generation feels like they were compensated or whatever. They made it into a fund. It's a permanent fund, and and generation after generation after generation of those natives um, uh, gain benefit from that. Um, and I
Which is
think that
how
that
you get generational wealth. That's how we have privilege as white people in America, is because we've had the ability to have generations of it passing on. That's one of the unfortunate things that happens with a lot of native populations is when everything was taken from them, they didn't have anything to be able to give their kids, and they didn't have anything to give their kids, and then they didn't have anything to give their kids. And I agree with you. I think that that's the correct way of, if you're going to do something, make sure that you're actually putting them into the position that they would have been in this day and age.
Yeah, and that's Pennsylvania. William Penn, his story is pretty interesting. That was his, the whole idea behind Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. That was his utopian. His he was a Quaker. He was a member of the Friends Society, and that was that. So he was given all of the land of Pennsylvania, and he was given it because his dad was an admiral that killed a whole bunch of Irish guys. So so his dad was killing the Irish on behalf of the British Crown. So the British Crown was getting uh, they ended up indebted to this guy, to William Penn's father, and William Penn had this religious conversion, was a kind of a 18th century hippie, and his dad thought he was a real pain in the ass, uh, and the crown thought he was a real pain in the ass. So when his dad died, what the crown did is they paid Penn off, his son, by giving him all the land that is Pennsylvania, in payment for his. There's
Just
so
go away. So it's kind of like what we're doing with Elon and Mars. Like, yeah, you can have Mars. Just leave us alone. Go away.
yeah, there's I'm the whole the shine of going to Mars has quickly left my brain.
the
There's a
the technology behind it still interests me, but man, there. So I've been having a conversation in the shop because he got trolled hard the other night, and he was testing the capabilities of Starlink by playing a game Path of Exile 2 on a plane. And the amount of trolls that went into his game's chat that were just spamming like die, 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 die. No one likes you, you're ruining America, like over and over and over again. So he's playing his video game, and then you see him like ignore comments, ignore block user. But there's this one point where someone leaves the message in all caps and copies and pastes the message over and over again, so it's just constantly filling the bottom of his screen is you have no true friends and you will die alone, you should do it yourself. And I'm just like, oh, I would never tell someone to kill themselves. I would never do that. I honestly would, because I've been that depressed and I've struggled with ideation, and I could never personally do that. Oh, they're mad at you. Because I, even in my never could in a million years do that, totally understand why someone else would. But it's the one time in the game where he just looks at it and like he has this moment of contemplation, just like staring at this message, and then just goes back to his game. So I've been having the conversation with people of like how horribly inappropriate it is, no matter how much you hate somebody, to like not only hope they kill themselves, but to tell them that they should. It's just horrific. And this kind of goes back to the topic that you were talking about earlier, with like people hoping other people die. When Trump got shot, I had a lot of friends that were on the page of, oh, man, if it was only a couple inches over, man, we were so close. And all I could think of is like, you really want to live through a presidential assassination? Like, that is sad. That is sad. That is a representation of what's wrong with America. Like the guy, I don't agree with him at all. I like. There's a lot of things that I'm not a fan of what that guy does. But you don't kill somebody because of their ideas and their words. And we're getting into this weird place of where's the boiling point. And so this is the thing that I was talking to you about earlier with real time, the episode last night with Bill Maher. So Bill Maher went to the White House like 2 weeks ago, and he was there with Kid Rock, and there was just a meeting that was like a 2.5 hour meeting. And Bill Maher, in his monologue, talks about his book report of the time that he was in the White House. And I watch Bill Maher because I love that there actually is a centrist talk show. I love his panels. I don't necessarily like the guy. I don't think he's that funny as a comedian. I think he's a bit more divisive than I personally like, especially on religion, because even though I don't necessarily find the value in religion for myself, I do find value that religion provides for people. I'm not going to make a documentary called Religulous. So he's talking about how when he's in the White House, he's realizing that the person on TV is not the president. And the person on TV is the persona of the president created by the president to be a TV character. And that's it. And that TV character is how he communicates his message to the world, but it's not necessarily who the guy is as an individual. And it was a really beautiful talking point of, I'm still going to criticize this guy, but now I understand he's a human and he has a sense of humor, and he's not the person that the media is making him out to be. And there's going to be a lot of people that'll probably criticize Bill for the fact that, oh man, you're saying nice things about the president. You've always said negative things about the president. But then he goes into the rest of the episode and he talks shit about policies. And that's where we need to be disagreeing on, is policies, not the person.
Yeah, and when we were talking about that before, the what really kind of drove that home for me was during the campaign, his granddaughter Kai Trump, who is Don Jr.'s daughter, um, and she's got a social media account, and she does a really good job in the whole influencer world. Particularly when you consider how young she is, but she's also a world class golfer. I mean, she's grown up on golf courses her entire
Makes
life.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially
So
who her family is.
she's very much like, very much like her grandfather, in that she is competitive to no end. And, uh, but, but she did a really great job, I think. And I don't think it was accidental. I'm going to give her credit and I don't think it was accidental. During the campaign, what she was trying to do was to showcase her grandpa and why she loved her grandpa.
Not the
So
president, but her grandpa.
that's exactly right. Not the president, not the not
Not
President
45,
Donald J.
47. Not the leader of MAGA, but Grandpa Don.
That's exactly right. And then once so I followed her on social media. Once I saw a couple of her things, I was like, wow, she's doing something really interesting here. And it made me look at Trump, observationally look at Trump from a different way. And he has always got his kids and his grandkids around him. He is, in this way, he is a lot like Joe Biden. In that Joe Biden, uh, is your typical Irish grandpa. Everybody is, if you're in the family, you're in the family. If you're not in the family, you're not in the family.
Yep.
There's, and Trump is the same way. And like this not this past weekend, but the weekend before, everybody was criticizing him because the stock market was crashing and he was playing golf at one of his resorts. But the whole golf thing was a fundraiser for all these really great causes. So he was participating in this. But anyway, when he landed, so he landed in the Marine One helicopter on the golf course, and he gets out, and his son Eric is waiting for him in a golf cart. And he gets off of Marine One, walks over, talks to a guy, and then gets in the cart with Eric. And then it's just a father and a son driving in a golf cart, going down the road, just probably talking about what's going on in their life.
And for what it's worth, like, I don't ever see myself in a position of power, but I could imagine that both of us have blind spots of the other person. But one thing that we both have is an inherent trust for one another.
Mm-hmm.
And, I can understand the criticism that he gets of keeping so much of his family in his circle, and especially in his first administration, when there were people that I don't think that should have had certain positions that they had. But I will absolutely respect the fact that that guy is a very true family man. And I think that that's a value that Americans really do resonate with because there is something about the family dynamic that has kind of crumbled in the last generation.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly what I thought that that Kai Trump picked up on, and that's what she was. She used her social media channels to talk to young people about her grandpa, and I think it really humanized uh, Donald Trump for a lot of people, and that. You know, I mean, I would credit her at least being part of the energy that caused Generation Z to vote pretty hard for Donald Trump.
So here's something that Donald Trump doesn't have, though, is a dog. And
Yeah, he
so
doesn't have a dog. Somebody asked him about it. Oh yeah, Bill Maher asked him about that.
Well, so earlier I told you about a big decision, and whether or not we were going to come home soon or come home late. I definitely almost bought a puppy today, uh, and we might still be buying a puppy tomorrow. And it is the most adorable little Chihuahua that is the exact same size of Lucy, and will probably grow up to be just like Lucy, which for listening and viewing audience is my dad's old Chihuahua that he once had. Little tiny, little itty bitty thing that would fit in your palm of your hand. It was adorable.
Now hang on, because there's a little bit more of a story to Lucy that I
Oh
gotta.
well, there, you can get into this story. So Haley and I have been talking for weeks, probably months to be honest, because we had to put Sumo down 2 years ago. And like I'm not going to talk about that because even though it's been 2 years, I will fucking cry. And to that extent, I've had two friends this last week have to do the same thing, and just talking to them, I've been like, ugh, like it's the worst thing. Like you have hundreds, if not thousands, of amazing days that you trade for the shittiest day of your life. And Tesla is getting older. She's 10 and a half, and we're not worried about anything for her, but we're kind of having this debate because the last 2 years she's been completely alone. And she's never been alone. And we're seeing that she's starting to get really lonely. So with all the stuff going on in our lives, we're like, we need to get a friend, and we're trying to figure out, is that the right decision? So that way she can be the old dog that helps raise the new dog and bring out some of that puppy energy in her, or do we want to just dedicate and dote over her and give her all of our love, and then when our time with her is over, we have the capacity to love something new and be able to dote and give that all the attention. So we've been having this debate for the last couple of months, and we keep asking ourselves, are we ready? Are we not ready? I don't know. So she had to go and return things to the FedEx store today. And the FedEx store is right next to a puppy store. And it's literally just a store that says puppies. So she's getting out of the car, and I'm like, I don't have any reason to go into the FedEx store. I'm going to go play with puppies. Which was the worst decision I could have ever made. It was like when you guys were in Hawaii and you're just looking at other people's dogs and torturing yourselves.
Yeah, that's and we ended up going to to the Humane Society, and that's when we got Benny,
Yeah, and
who
you got the
was like,
most sad, pathetic dog that you could rescue.
I know, it's like we there's a we were in this sad, pathetic mood, so we went to the pound and we got the most sad, pathetic dog that was there. Oh, it was
Ugh.
just a
So
uh,
I go in there, and there is a 3 pound Chihuahua. It is fawn with blue eyes, and it looks the exact same body shape as Lucy and Oliver. And I'm just like, oh, little buddy. Oh, you're so cute. And I pick him up, and immediately he just puts his head on my shoulder and just like kind of nestles there. I'm like, oh no, you have a good personality. You're not an asshole Chihuahua. Oh no. Oh no, I think we're getting a puppy today. So So we go to the bookstore just to get out of the puppy store. And the entire time we're walking around the bookstore, we're just having this conversation of like, well, I mean, there's no real wrong decision. It's a good decision to have an older dog raise a younger dog. It's also a good decision to give all of our love to one dog. It's 3 pounds. How much is it going to cost to feed it? It's not like it's really that expensive. It's the initial investment. So we're having this argument. And we wind up sitting in the parking lot as I'm texting you, saying like, "Hey, are we ready for? We can do the episode tonight." We sat in her car idling for probably 20 minutes, just figuring out: are we driving home or are we driving back to the puppy store? So we might be driving back to the puppy store tomorrow. So Lucy and Oliver were these two little tiny chihuahuas that had the most adorable looking Rottweiler markings, but were just really small. And this story is pretty hilarious.
So, so the first inkling that I had that I was probably headed towards a divorce from your mother was when I came home one night from work and she had a dog, Lucy, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, we had been married for a long time. We'd been married 27 years, and I'm like, we had never gotten a dog without talking about it first. I mean, it was like that because a dog, just like you're going through right now. I mean, that's a big decision.
16-year decision.
So I'm like, and if we had talked about it, I probably wouldn't have chosen a Chihuahua. There's
I was a ranger. I was an instructor for the Rangers. I taught officers how to be officers. I did all the security for the federal government and the airports. And you know what I need is a little purse dog.
exactly. So I'm like, oh, okay. There's so I realized that obviously she was adamant about having it. It was because she came home with the dog. It's not like she said, "Hey, do you want to have a dog?" or
Yeah,
something
she
like
didn't come
that.
home with questions. She came home with a puppy.
She came home with a puppy, and so I was like, okay, and you're right. Lucy ended up being a great. And at the time, we had another dog that is another great story named Corey Feldman, and and that dog we got because your brother Brad came up to me in the backyard one day, literally just came up to me. I don't know what I was doing, but he came up to me in the backyard and he's like, "Dad, I want a dog named Corey Feldman." And I'm like, I didn't know how to say no to that. I mean, and it's so like your brother, because that's not like a I'm asking this question and it's part of my thought process.
I've
It's
made a
like,
decision and I'm letting you know.
yeah, it's like I've had a lot of thinking about this and this is really. So it's like I don't even know how to like start asking questions and hey, are you sure you're ready for it? Do you want to do that? All the things that you would normally do, because clearly he had done that because he didn't just want a dog. He wanted a dog named Corey Feldman.
Yeah, and he had the name even before looking for dogs, and it was a matter of him going and, okay, is this? No, that dog's not Corey Feldman. That dog's not Corey Feldman. When he found the dog that was Corey Feldman, that was Corey Feldman, and Corey Feldman was coming home.
Yep, and Corey Feldman was a wonderful dog. When your brother left, she was a one person dog, and I ended up being her person, so she didn't want to leave.
And for everyone listening, it's not a joke. This dog would not respond to Corey. It would not respond to Feldman. Corey Feldman, come over here. You were saying the full name because the big joke was Corey Feldman was Brad's bitch.
there's but it was so funny because Lucy was a loved to play, and she would go and Corey Feldman was kind of standoffish. She wasn't the
She
rough.
was the dog that you would have gotten.
Yeah, she absolutely was the dog I would have gotten. There's but So she was looking at Lucy, and she was like, well, I guess I should play with it, but I don't want to bite it because I might kill it, and
Because
I
she was
know I
what,
shouldn't
like
kill it because
45,
it.
50 pounds?
Say again, what?
Corey Feldman was what, 45, 50 pounds?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
She was.
And Lucy's 3.
Yeah. So Lucy would come at her, and Corey Feldman would put her head down and put her nose underneath her and flip her up in the air like a porpoise playing with a beach ball. And that's how they would play, because Corey Feldman didn't want to was afraid that if she bit her, she'd kill her because she was so small.
Yeah.
So she would flip her around with her nose. It was just absolutely adorable. But then when your mother did leave, she took Lucy with her, right? And that's when I figured out, it's like, oh, that was a divorce dog. She was getting the dog so that she'd have a dog when she left me, so she was planning it out. There's but apparently where she was staying, there was a cat. I think it was with your cousin.
I can't remember if it was when she was staying with Erica or if it was when she was staying with was it her friend Vicky, I think? Regardless, she couldn't have Lucy.
Because this cat was kicking the dog's ass.
Yeah.
There's so and so that this gregarious, playful little puppy was just hiding inside its kennel all the time because it was afraid that the cat would beat it up again. So she comes to me and she's like, "Will you take the dog?" So I'm like, "You mean you got a divorced dog and then you're gonna give me the divorced dog back?" So I had, and Lucy was a wonderful dog. She really was.
And just so you know, having just talked to Mom a couple days ago, Lucy is not a was, Lucy still is and is.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
There's
So she's like 16 years old.
Yeah, and I was like, I had to get rid of the dog because it was just such
The heartbreak.
yeah, it was a very heartbreaking time for me, and and Lucy was like this little burrowing dog, so loved to cuddle, like, so you'd be in the bed, and so I'd be in the middle of the night, this dog's cuddling with me, and I'm all alone in the bed with just there's it was I had to get rid of Lucy, and I always felt bad about having to give her up.
So the dog that we were looking at today, that was actually one of the things that Haley was concerned about because Tesla is mostly indifferent to other dogs. Like she and Sumo were best friends. Any other dog she doesn't really care about. And Haley's like, well, what if Tesla like injures her or something like that? And I'm like, you need to give the little tiny dog way more credit. It's way more sturdy because I'm thinking of Lucy getting flipped on these things. But to the burrowing point, like after it had its head on my shoulder, it just started like putting its head in my armpit and putting it under my chin. I'm just like, oh, you're hitting all of those spots that I really don't want you to get because I don't want to spend this much money today.
There's and yeah, they're great. And I would have never, again, I wouldn't have chosen to get a tiny little Chihuahua like that. But she was exactly that. She was a dog that if you gave her a chance, she would, even if you just gave her half a chance, she would steal your heart.
See, and Mom and I were having this conversation because as Haley and I are having the discussion, I called her up and I was like, okay, I want your opinion. We're talking about getting a dog. And Mom's like, okay, well, are you going to adopt from the Humane Society? Because I just had this conversation with my sister yesterday. And Aunt Rhonda, her Pekingese passed away last year. And it was literally right while they were driving to Seattle to go see Erica. It was
Well, it
on
was
the road.
always having a hard time breathing anyway.
Yeah. There's certain breeds that I am just like, I can't do that. Pugs are the exact same way. Brad used to have Frenchies, and I'm just like, I don't want to listen to that all day long. Uh, but Aunt Rhonda went through a breeder, and she got a little tiny, tiny Pomeranian, and it is the most adorable little thing in the world. And Mom's argument is you can rescue a dog that needs a home, and it's better because that dog could potentially face an end that's a premature end, and it's a whole lot more affordable. Now, when I was married to my ex-wife, we had four purebred Italian Greyhounds, and we had Lucy's brother Oliver, which was a purebred Chihuahua. And one of the things that we'd never really cared about, like breeding them, like yes, we had purebreds, but we neutered and spayed every single one of them. We were wanting personality traits, and we were wanting to have a very specific dog that fit our lifestyle. And when Haley and I adopted Sumo, we went to the Humane Society because there was overflow from a California kill shelter. And we're like, this dog is awesome. And she's a sweetheart. And she's great. And she's a puppy. And she's just perfect. But the Humane Society told us that she was going to be 45 pounds. And then that dog grew to be 110 pounds. And that was not in our lifestyle of living in a tiny apartment. That was completely unfair to Sumo. The fortunate thing about our apartment is we actually had a pretty decent sized backyard. So it's not like she was stuck in this apartment all the time. And we live close to parks. So we were able to make it work. But it is certainly an extra thing. So when we were getting Sumo a friend, I knew that I liked high energy, small dogs that I can play with, but they can kind of entertain themselves because they're smart. So we wanted to do a kind of a Jack Russell. And we found a breeder and found out the breeder had lied and that it was a rat terrier mixed with an Italian greyhound. So we were supposed to have a 45-pound dog, but that turned into a 110-pound dog. And then we were supposed to have a 35-pound dog, but that turned into a 15-pound dog. So we have these huge swaths of not hitting our expectations. So coming into this next dog, we've been talking about it for months of what type of dog do we want and what kind of lifestyle do we want to have, because for the next 16 years, that's going to impact it. And we didn't get to travel because Sumo was really, really difficult to travel with, and it was really expensive to crate her. But I mean, 12-pound dog, I can take a 12-pound dog with me. I can easily pick that up and carry it with me. That's not a problem. And there's a lot of stores post-COVID that have started allowing pets to be a part of it. Restaurants have patio areas. So it's a much more accessible thing than it used to be. It doesn't mean that it's easier with a larger dog. So we've been talking again about Italian Greyhounds, Whippets, smaller breed dogs. And I think there's a really interesting argument that a lot of people don't necessarily recognize. I don't need a dog to protect the house. I need a dog to let me know that I need to go grab the thing that I use to protect the house. And small dogs are awesome for that.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah, little yippy dogs are like, there's somebody here. There's somebody here. Everybody know there's somebody here. There's somebody here. And then I'm like, oh, are they supposed to be here? So I like little dogs. And I like that if I get annoyed by a little dog, I can be like, okay, off you go. And I'm not fighting 110 pounds of struggle. So we'll see what happens tomorrow.
We'll see.
In transition.
Oh, okay.
Table topics.
Table topics. What are we going to pull?
I don't know. Let's see. Actually, I did something fun earlier. I'll tell you about this thing that I did on AI, and somebody asked me what this cube was while I was live streaming. All right. Where is your favorite place to hide out? Me personally, my garage. My garage is where all of my workout equipment is. It is the place that I spend about an hour and a half a day. And if I want to just be alone, I can go out to my garage and have a place where I can have just mental clarity. And I actually really, really enjoy having a space that I can go to. Where do you like to hide out?
Well, for me, it's a bit of a left field question because I'm
Is the answer just Boulder, Colorado?
yeah, because I live alone and I don't have a social life really, you know. there's so I mean I'm in my apartment alone quite a bit, quite a bit. So I mean that would be the place that I hide out is in my apartment. And then like I'll go to Pearl Street or I'll go someplace else if I want to have any kind of human interaction. So yeah, my apartment um there's and I don't know if there's like a particular place because sometimes uh, I'll be at my computer where I'm at right now, doing stuff. Sometimes, like in the morning, the first thing I do is I've got a chair right next to my bed, and I sit in that chair and drink coffee and read the news.
Not your beer?
So, say again?
Not your morning beer?
No, I actually I drink coffee in the first thing in the morning, and that's like my my morning alone time, which I've always had an alone time in the morning. I used to get up very early in the morning just so that I could be alone with my thoughts for a little while, and I still have that practice. So that's probably my favorite, place is sitting in the chair that's right next to my bed. First thing when I get up. Uh, drinking coffee, and I have a ritual. Like I read the local newspaper, and then I read the Wall Street Journal, and then I read the Apple News feed.
I I think that's kind of interesting because that's I met up with a client of mine this morning because his wife is trying to start a business, and I told him, "Hey man, if she needs any advice, I'm more than happy to give her all of the insight I have of starting a business and some of the struggles that she's coming to and just some of the ideas of what she'll be thinking." So we meet up at 9, and he's like, you done anything this morning?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've been up since 5:15." He's like, "On a Saturday?" It's like, yeah, I don't understand days off. Like, I don't understand sleeping in. I have a very important time that if I don't keep it, I start to get really depressed. And it's part of it is because cutting hair, I don't want to work out at night because when I come home, I want to get hair off of my body. I certainly don't want to sweat and itch even more than I already do. So I'm not going to, come home, get in the shower, work out just to then get in the shower to go to bed. So I had to find time in order to be able to work out, and it was waking up early. And typically, what I do to start out is I spend about 15-20 minutes on my exercise bike, just like, okay, get your body moving. I'm not really trying to do anything. I need to get my body moving. And because I'm in a stationary position, I can check my news feed, I can listen to my podcasts, and I can be getting my body ready before I actually start working out. But I was telling him that, at one point it was me wanting to work out, but now I'm realizing that that's my time that I get to be in my head. And that's the time that I actually really, really do value more than I ever really understood because it's the one time a day that I really get my thoughts straight. I get an understanding of what world it is that I'm about to go into, and it gives me an understanding of what type of conversations I might be having with the public that day because uh, people talk to me about anything. Like nothing is off limits for me. I need to tell you a story about my viral TikTok nonsense. And what's really interesting is I've gotten to this point where I'm also able to recognize how I'm going to be able to interact with the day because I look at the time on my bike as not working out, and then I have my actual workout afterwards. But if I'm only stretching and doing yoga, I'm not pushing myself and I'm not motivated that day. And when I go have breakfast afterwards, I'm like, yeah, I didn't work out. I'm having a really hard time today. And I can recognize that now. And it's this time that it really, really does help me get aligned. And I never really understood the value of it until I'm talking to him about why it is that I wake up at 5:30 even on Saturdays and Sundays and I just never sleep in. Um so viral TikTok thing. Um You saw the stupid video I made, right?
Well, I'm not sure which one because I don't know if I thought it was stupid, so I'm not sure which one it was. You made
Oh,
you.
I I thought this was stupid. So I was making a video while I was on my exercise bike last week, and it was the day after the tariffs. So the tariffs got announced on Wednesday, and then that Thursday, my buddy comes in. And I used to work with him when I was working at T-Mobile, so I've known him for about 20 years. He's worked in the tabletop gaming industry for like board games and like really elaborate board games. And I've helped produce a board game. Like there was that game Pacifist that we came out with years ago. Haley and I play a lot of board games. I back board games on Kickstarter. And I knew this is an industry that was impacted. And I even, there's a game that we backed on Kickstarter that they had the entire campaign, everything was funded, and then they put all of their contracts into their Chinese manufacturers and they were under contract, and then the tariffs hit. So I emailed them and said, like, hey, are you gonna need more money from me? Or is there gonna be something else? Just, when you guys figure that out, please send an update out. Because I know everybody's trying to figure that out. So my buddy comes in, and this is before it got to the height that it was. This was just the first round of the tariffs to China when I think it was like, what, 34%? Um, and he sits down and he says, after all is said and done between the entire supply chain, we're going to be hit about 56% into our margins. And that industry works on pretty slim margins. It's not a lot of profit. It's enough profit to keep it going, but it's really not a lot of profit. It's a passion industry for people that really enjoy board games. So I make this video on TikTok that is simply talking about the realities of situations and the fact that, you know, small businesses are going to be impacted. But my business, I am an American good and service. I'm good. I'm fine. Uh, but the hair product that I sell comes from Canada, so that might suck. We'll see what happens. I don't know. And I started talking about the fact that this year was actually going to be a year that we were potentially going to be raising prices. And now I have to make a completely different decision on whether or not I want to continue being um, somebody who can allow my clients to budget for me? Or do I need to rise with the tide because everything's going to be expensive and I need to make sure that I stay afloat too? Because I guarantee that as soon as my lease is up in November, my rent's going to go up and all of my expenses are going to go up. So, even though I'm a good and service that's American made, I'm still impacted. So, making that whole conversation. And then this girl leaves a comment that says, increase the price and then have a box on the site that asks who they voted for. If it was Kamala, give them a discount to the original price. So I make this video.
I saw that one.
That's a really stupid fucking thing to say. Because it is. It is. It's a really stupid thing to say because it promotes discrimination in your business. And that's all that it is that I was talking about is discrimination in your business. That blew up on conservative TikTok. And for like the last week, my phone has just been ping, 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 comment, 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 like, ping, 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 ping. Own the libs. And it's been really, really funny just seeing how people are actually resonating with the idea of like, look, I don't care who you voted for. Don't make a discriminatory practice in your business whatsoever. And it's just been this ongoing thing now, and it's frustrating. So earlier today, so I've been making a handful of videos, and that's probably why you weren't sure which video I was talking about. So I'm trying to lean into communicating with people in my social media kind of the way that we communicate here. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to like the things, but we just have to have a conversation. So I was doing something with my one of my AI bots, and was live streaming the way that I communicate with it. And somebody had noticed this cube, and they're like, "What's the cube in the background?" I was like, "Oh, this is well, that's weird. Nobody's asked me about what the cube on my desk is. It's a weird thing that I do to have conversations with my dad, and a weird podcast that I do with my dad." Anyways, all of this story is to tell you, I've started a interesting experiment of building something in AI that's different. I think I told you a couple weeks ago about training it on all of my blogs,
Mhm.
so that way I could get it to write for me because I couldn't write.
Yeah, and GPT just announced that the memory
Yeah.
is yeah. So now it'll remember all your
Yeah.
conversations.
Yes. 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 Um, and this is one of those areas that people get creeped out by. How much information do you want to give the AI overlord? Uh, and me personally, all of it. I'll give you all of the information because the more information I give you, the better you are going to be for me.
Yeah, because you're the overlord. It's not the overlord. You are.
Exactly. It's a tool. That's it. And I imagine that anything that I'm comfortable giving AI, I'm obviously comfortable giving to the internet. So I'm going to live stream this entire thing that I'm doing. And the goal that I have now is I want to start making daily videos that are just like 30 to 90-second long of just a blurb on whatever's going on in the world. But I don't want to research it. I don't want to think about it. I just want to be able to create it and be able to move forward and then let engagement happen so that way I can engage with people authentically and have content creation curated. And I think that that's one of the ways that I want to use that tool. So that way I can just create things that allow for engagement. And then I can naturally engage with people the way that I've been responding in videos and being able to do things a little bit more ad lib. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna have ChatGPT interview me for like 4 hours. So this afternoon, I sat in front of the computer, put on the voice thing, and I was like, I want you to interview me. This is what my goal is. I need you to learn as much about me as possible. And I'm doing this in the exact same chat that I've trained it on my writing styles. So now that specific bot understands how it is that I communicate with other people, what kind of sentiment it is that I'm trying to provide in a professional and personal manner. But now I need it to be able to really understand me. So what better way than just having it interview me? So we get through like the first 45 minutes of the interview, and I think that it gets a little bit of information that's beneficial to what the end product is that I'm trying to create. And I ask it to test on the tariffs. Make a short script for me and base it off of the tariffs. And it did a good job, but it did a good job of creating a moderate stance. I gotta understand why this is happening, but this could also be happening to people too. And it sounded really wishy-washy. And to Bill Maher's credit, he was very moderate last night in the way that he spoke about the president, but he's still opinionated and he
Mhm.
still feels the way that he feels. And that was the thing that I realized in that moment. Okay, you're only being the moderate part. I need you to learn about my opinions. How can you ask me questions where you can learn about how it is that I formulate my opinions? What I need you to start doing is asking me kind of trolley dilemma questions, where you're going to put me into a hypothetical scenario and then make me rationalize and then ask me about what made me come to those decisions. So that's what the entire interview wound up turning into. And one of the realities of becoming a barber is you have a career where you listen to your friends tell the exact same story hundreds of times, and the stories just keep getting better and more elaborate every single time because they've gotten so used to telling those stories. And I think everybody's kind of been in that situation where, you've got those two stories in your back pocket that if you're in a social environment and somebody needs something like, oh man, I've got a really good story for you. Let me tell you about when I got blackout drunk at the governor's ball, right? Okay, this is going to be a good story because I wound up getting tattooed and tattooed another guy. And it was just like this insane story. And for anyone that wants to know that true life story, you can read about it on thebarberstory.com. Uh, so, so I've told these stories over and over and over and over again, but now the AI has a new directive and it starts asking me, okay, how did those experiences change the way that you interact with your friends and your clients? And nobody asks me those questions. Nobody asks me those follow up questions. And it's really interesting because now I'm reliving these stories, but I'm actually having to think like, oh, how did I, objectively speaking, I would say that it did this. And, if I'm really looking at it, I would say that this story caused this situation from me. So using AI to interview myself has been really, really an interesting way of learning about the development of me as a person from an outside perspective, looking at myself. But it very much gave me the idea of how much AI could really be used to let elderly people tell their stories and be able to let that story be told to generations that might not have an opportunity to hear it. And I think of, God, if Grandma Pat had access to all of this stuff, like the joy that she had when FaceTime first came out, and how much she embraced technology, and how much you embrace technology as kind of a reflection of her, man, how cool could that have been? And I wound up having a phone call that I had with Terry yesterday. That man is stubborn and does not embrace technology whatsoever. And I wish that he did because I bet there's a ton of stories that I could hear about him if I could have that thing curate
Yeah,
the
yeah.
interview.
He's an interesting guy.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
It's so funny that your grandma Pat with and embracing the whole FaceTime technology. There's because I mean I will always remember our last conversation because it was the Saturday before Martin Luther King Jr.'s holiday, and we had this wonderful conversation over FaceTime. Um, about how much the world has changed in our lifetimes, um, and where we thought that it still needed to change, and so it was very much a dream speech, a Martin Luther King esque dream conversation, and then because I always called her on Saturdays, the next Saturday, for whatever reason, I got busy and I didn't call her, and so I never got to. I didn't get to have that next Saturday's conversation, and she was dead before the Saturday after that. So I've got like I've got this wonderful memory of our last conversation and this very bittersweet realization that I let whatever it was. To this day I do not know what I thought was more important than calling my mom, but I let something be more important than calling her, and I missed that last Saturday conversation that we could have had.
You
And
know that
for a long time, after she died, I would just sit there and I would talk to the ceiling or to the sky, and I was like, if there's any way that you can come back just for one more conversation, if we can just, uh, I would have given anything to have one more conversation with her. Um, I where I land that fly ball is remembering the substance of the conversation that we did have, and it was such a profound conversation, and it gave me. I've talked about this before. The one of the reasons why and I have a hard time using the word conservative anymore because conservative doesn't mean what it used to mean.
Because you consider yourself a traditionalist.
Yeah, I'm very much a traditionalist, and particularly when it comes to national norms, I'm like, uh, there's America is like the greatest thing that has ever happened to the earth. It's just, and it's not even close. There is nothing else that compares to the impact that the United States has had on the world. And we've had that impact um, over time because people change at a pace. And if you try and change people at a pace faster than what they're comfortable with, that's when violence breaks out. So like the Civil War was very necessary violence, but it was necessary violence because we were no longer satisfied with the pace of change on on the slavery issue, and we were just like, well, you know what, we've got to fix this. But then as soon as it was over with, the whole reason why Jim Crow developed in the United States is because we went back to that pace of change, and we were like, yeah, someday we'll get to equality, but at least we don't have slavery anymore, right? Um, but if I just look at the things that have happened in my lifetime, there's I talk about the whole pride movement being what I think is the most successful nonviolent political movement in the history of the United States. And I say that because, I was 5 years old when Stonewall happened. And Stonewall happened because like if you were just dressed in a way that is different than what your apparent gender was, the cops could just like pick you up and throw you in jail because you were wearing a dress as a guy.
It
And
definitely doesn't look like history is repeating itself right now whatsoever, does it?
yeah, there's well, I don't there's there I kind of think that
I worry about there are a handful of reports of students getting disappeared and individuals that there's footage of government enforcement just picking up people, and that's a very scary concept with how forceful a lot of the hands are happening with the government right now.
yeah, but the other side of that coin is we went through 4 years of a fire hose of unlawful migration into
I
the United
agree.
States.
I agree. I think that the one of the things that's really sticking out in my mind right now is so the Supreme Court 9-0.
Yeah, very
That is like we have not seen that kind of definitive decision from the Supreme Court of you fucked up, you bring him back.
Yeah, actually, we have because just when Colorado just during this past election cycle, um, uh, uh, the made a decision to take uh, Donald Trump off of the ballot, and
I also agree that that was wrong.
yeah, the state attorney general who's now running for governor said because he was uh, convicted of it was anyway. So they used the felony conviction to say that he was an insurrectionist, and because he was an insurrectionist, they were going to remove him off of the ballot. But it was very, very plain
Yes.
that they just wanted Donald Trump off the ballot, and they were using whatever means that they could in order to deliver the state of Colorado to Joe Biden.
Now,
That's what it was.
I would
And
argue
the
that
decision that the Supreme Court made was 9-0.
so
The,
I would argue that yes, that was another unanimous decision, but it's kind of apples oranges right now. In the way that I look at it, because the the stacked court and how they have been very supportive of, and you also agree with the executive power of that office, for them to unanimously go against the president while supporting his executive action. That's more of the context of what I'm talking about, that we haven't seen that kind of unified message against the president. The
but the devil's in the details in that case. There, how on earth they did that, I have no idea. I mean, that's one of the, we talk about, that's not a conspiracy. That was just plain idiocy.
Yeah.
And there's
Well,
and I
and
mean, the guy
you're
was
doing
under a
things.
court order not to go to El Salvador because, there's so, and even if he is a member of MS-13, putting him into a prison filled with, nothing but rival gang members, um, is is just not, and to do it without any kind of a, yeah, there that so
Due
they
process.
there, but that, but again, so there was a bunch of guys who went down there on a plane, and one guy has to come back. The rest of the guys that were like I'll use your language, that are being disappeared. There's I mean that's people who
Oh,
are here illegally.
that's
And here in Colorado, there's a gal. She just got picked up by ICE as well, and she's been here for decades. But she was being hid here in Boulder by the Quaker Church. So she was
yeah.
living in the
I'd heard
Quaker.
about this. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
she
this is
was
one of
living
the
in the
other
Quaker
arguments that they're
Church.
talking about of safe spaces and sanctuaries.
Yeah.
And
So
and
if you're here for 30 years illegally, you're still here illegally, and you can't really complain when immigration picks you up and throws you out of the country.
so that those people, I am not arguing on. How can I say this? I am not advocating that the people who are here illegally that are caught, I don't think that we should cater to illegal action. And I can appreciate that. And to your point, all the MS-13 people, be gone. I like, why on earth would I want them here? That absolutely makes no sense. And those aren't even the people that I'm talking about getting disappeared. More of what I'm talking about, let me see here.
You talk about the guy from Columbia University.
No, because I actually am on um I'm on the same page as Marco Rubio. I genuinely am. If he had been honest in his visa application, then he never would have been given status to come in here. And that's kind of the argument of, if everybody was honest on their firearms application, there probably would be a lot of people that wouldn't have firearms because they shouldn't have firearms. And unfortunately, those people have firearms. And I would argue those people probably shouldn't have firearms. Uh,
Like
so
Hunter Biden.
100% Hunter Biden should not have had a firearm while he's doing fucking crack. Uh, ugh. Um, no, there's Sudiksha Kanaki. So this was a University of Pittsburgh student, and there's actually CCTV surveillance footage of, she was in a I believe she was in a hijab, and she was just picked up. And there is still a lot of mystery surrounding her. She is not a protester. She's not somebody that's advocating. She, I believe, was on a visa. Um, and she's just disappeared. And that's kind of the things that are a little bit more concerning is when when you do something so rapidly and so quickly, you will make mistakes. And it seems to me that they're okay with making mistakes, but they're not willing to effectively fix their mistakes. And that's where my
Yeah.
issue is.
And
Is
I think I would agree with you there because, like, one of the things that they're doing, and I understand why they're doing, is as soon as they get somebody, they're driving them across state lines. They're getting
yes,
them as far away as they can, so that if they have any family that can pay for their legal defense, or if they have a lawyer already,
they're
now
isolated.
yeah, they're you. So you, if you, that's fine. You got a lawyer that's licensed to practice law in Illinois. Well, we arrested you in Illinois, and 2 hours later you're in Missouri, or you're not even in Missouri. You're in Florida.
Yeah.
You're all the way across the country. So and what it appears to me that they're doing is they're trying to make it as uh, to eliminate as much due process as they possibly can because they want to deport people quickly. And I think that's what this Supreme Court decision. I think that's one of the reasons why I think I'm glad that there was a 9-0 decision on that particular case because it was clearly wrong. It should not have happened. Um, but it's also important to note that I think there was 30 guys that went down there and one's coming back.
Yeah.
So
And the other people that are there, I personally good. Good. I don't think that we should have people who are violent criminals in America, and I don't think that that should be a controversial statement, especially if there's no reason for them to be here other than they want to continue being a violent individual. That's that shouldn't be controversial.
yeah, and just it's so funny because the research paper that I'm doing in school for this term is I think I might have mentioned this. It's on the parable of the prodigal son.
Yeah, you'd mentioned that.
But the interesting thing about that parable is it's actually part of a trilogy. There's three parables, one right after the other, and it's interesting in a lot of different ways. So I'm going to geek out for a second here, but like so, the first parable, Jesus tells it just to the men, so he gets the attention of the men. But then the second parable he tells just to the women. So he like gets the attention of the women and like Jesus doesn't normally use feminine characters in his parables. He does, but like there's 108 characters and only 9 are women. So it's very, very unusual for there to be a female character. And in this case, not only is it a female character, but it's a female character that he specifically got the attention of the women in the crowd to tell them a particular story that he wanted them to hear.
So
So I
he's
think
telling stories that resonate with the audience.
that's exactly right. So, but the first parable in that trilogy is the parable of the lost sheep. So the Christian principle, is that you leave the 99 to go get the one.
Hmm.
And that's a principle, right? So that's a principle that we've got to kind of grab a hold of. And if you're doing the right thing by 99 people and you're doing the wrong thing by that one person, we need to be concerned with the one person that we're doing the wrong thing for,
Because
and
the
not be
99
like,
can take care of themselves because you've supported them.
that's exactly right. So and the reason I'm bringing that up is because I was kind of being real flippant with that. I'm like, yeah, but the other 29, they were legit, and how somehow that 29 being legit erases the 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 illegitimacy of the one, And that's one of the things. It's like when we talk about the Judeo-Christian ethic of the U.S. system, that was the Supreme Court leaving the 99 to protect the one.
Yeah. Um,
So there was
the
my sermon for today.
Oh, I thought you were gonna tell me all three of them.
No,
Here you are just geeking out, like, oh, here's a third of it to be continued.
yeah, yeah.
We know how Hollywood likes a sequel.
It was just because that 99 to 1 was coming up. And it's one of those things that it's so interesting. We were talking about faith earlier, how when you're, if you have a faith and you hear something and you're supposed to believe it, but then I'm sitting here talking and I'm like, yeah, but the other 29 were fine.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. I'm in the middle of studying this thing and I know this to be true. Now, why am I acting? Why am I behaving as if it's okay
Yeah.
for,
And
anyway.
this is where and again, like coming back to some of the stuff where I talk about like do I align with a specific religion? Not necessarily, but I do align with these values.
Yeah.
And I think that there's more people that are non-religious, non-theistic people that do align with these values, but they're just so turned off by the concept of Jesus and they're so turned off by the concept of God because of more than likely religious trauma and the way that it was forced upon people. And we can make the probably either next week or the week after we can do a whole episode on homeschooling. But that was one of the things about the way that I was raised was a Christian homeschool education, and that's what I learned. But when I learned other options that were out there, it's not that I wanted to have a different kind of Sky Daddy, or if I wanted to have a different kind of mythos behind things. I was looking for the values that most aligned with me. And the weirdest part of all of it is like the values that I have are still pretty Judeo-Christian in my understanding of it. I just don't necessarily define it the way that a lot of other people do. But the time in the morning, I'm having conversations. And this is one of the things that I really enjoy about tarot. And I don't know if I've told you like why it is that I actually really get into tarot. Um, but I have like a lot of tarot decks over here. And it's just kind of an interesting practice for me to be able to listen to what the universe wants to tell me. And usually all it is I will find cards and there's meanings and I reflect on those meanings with what's going on in my personal life. Do I necessarily think that there is a universe that is talking to me directly and it's like, oh, it's guiding your hands to unfold the cards? Not necessarily, but I think that there's also a message of the Lord works in mysterious ways. And if that's a way that communication to me can happen and I can hear these things that allow me to recognize things that are going on in my life so that way I can continue with the values that I have and be able to reinstill those values of love towards others, it's a little bit more practical because it talks to me more directly than me just having this inner dialogue with myself. It's kind of the same way that I use AI to prompt things out of me. I can't trust my inner dialogue. I have way too many demons and I have way too many different types of conversations that are occurring at the same time. And uh, uh, it's hard to keep a lot of that straight. I read this really interesting book last year, and I don't know if I told you about it. Sociopath, a Memoir. Um,
I don't think so.
this is I oh man, this book is probably the one book that I have resonated with more than any other book in my entire life. And my therapist and I were having a lot of arguments about sociopathy with some of the things that happen in my head. And reading this book was like, did you live my life? uh, but what her argument is so on the DSM, sociopathy and psychopathy can only be defined if criminal activity has already occurred. And if criminal activity has occurred, that's the threshold where you will be defined as a sociopath or a psychopath. But her argument, and one that I would very heavily agree with, is that if you're a good enough sociopath, you're not going to get caught. And you're going to create your own ethos so that way you can still be a part of society and you can be a sociopath without it interfering with other people's perception of you.
Yeah,
So,
like what was that? Um, I think it was on Showtime. Dexter.
yeah. Yeah. So, and that's a perfect example. Now, I would argue he's a psychopath. Um, I would argue that he has more psychopathy than sociopathy. Uh, but Patrick Agnew is she's a PhD, and the reason she has a PhD is because she was talking to her therapist about all of these internal urges that she had, and she was developing the system to um, allow herself certain aspects that would kind of satisfy her needs while not harming other individuals. And she created her own ethos. And through therapy, she actually was diagnosed with sociopathy. And she's an advocate that it's not necessarily a complete inability to feel, but it is a disability where it is harder for you to feel. And like, I think one of a really good example and one that I personally struggle with is in the movie Joker, the one with, oh, Joaquin Phoenix. He has this card that he has to give people on a bus because in uncomfortable situations he laughs incessantly and he doesn't know how to associate emotions properly, and that's a lot of problems with sociopathy is that their emotions are not correct emotions for the situations that they're in based off of society. And it's not that they're incapable of learning those things and feeling those things, it's just a lot harder for them, and they need to understand what's the appropriate emotion to feel in the situation that they're in, and it's a huge disadvantage. That's one of the things that I have always had a struggle with because there are different types of conversations that happen in my head that are maybe not necessarily the same types of conversations that I think a lot of neurotypicals have. Um, and when I was talking to my therapist about it, it's like, look, I don't really want to have a diagnosis as a sociopath. I don't see that doing me any favors. Um, however, it's something that I can recognize because her argument is that it's a part of the spectrum of neurodivergency and that it should be considered as part of that, and that crime should be the threshold from going from sociopathy to psychopathy. And I think it's a really, really good argument. I cannot recommend this book enough to anyone who wants to learn a little bit more about sociopathy. But because again, I have these weird conversations that go in my head. If I'm ever in like prayer and I'm just trying to, you know, talk to the guy upstairs, it goes everywhere. There's no way that I can actually hear anything. But with tarot, it's the same thing that AI does. Prompt me, give me something that I can actually be forcing to think about something in my mind. Now, at the end of the day, I genuinely do believe I'm probably having the same conversation that you're having. And I think that the important value of being able to have time to reflect on your own self and reflect on your greater purpose and reflect on the thing that's giving you an opportunity. I think there's just the thing that's listening to us. But one of the lessons that I know church taught me is that God is a selfish God. He wants your attention. He wants you to be devoted to him. Now, I would argue that God is also smart, probably. Uh, and in that level of intelligence that is far past a lizard brain, God could probably introduce himself, herself, they self, deity self in a manner that is going to most resonate with the individual. And to that individual, God might look like X, it might look like Y, it might look like Z, but it is the act of being able to have devotion that the entity is looking for. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's some things that really resonate with me. So like um, one of there's a couple Catholic practices that have been really helpful. One of them is uh, prayers that you recite as opposed to just like spontaneously say whatever's on your mind. So it kind of forces you to conform your thoughts into a prayer that somebody wrote, 1500 years ago, 800
Okay.
years ago. And so that I do a lot of recitation prayer, and really what I'm doing is I'm agreeing with the with the church throughout the ages. So I'm saying, oh, there's the saints in the 5th century were had they had the same theological knowledge, basically. That it's a little bit not that way, but they but their desires and their emotions regarding the holy are the same as mine. So why do I need to like try and figure out something to say when in reality, we think when we pray we're talking to God so that God will respond to what we say to him, but really what ends up happening is as we're talking to God, we hear what we're saying and we end up being transformed by that act of prayer.
It's the reflection of what the prayer is about and how it's relevant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so that's been very helpful for me. I do recitation prayers, and then the other thing that's interesting to me with regard to your tarot practice is the Catholic Church does this thing called veneration of the saints,
Okay.
and saints are people who lived. They were
Like
Christian
Mother
people who
Teresa.
lived, but the qualities of their life are so apparent, uh, and that they were holy people set apart for God, that the church as a whole says this person's in heaven. We absolutely positively are certain that this person, whatever is that magic threshold that you've got to get
Yeah.
past,
They got the
that
brownie points.
they got it. So like Mother Teresa, she like literally like as soon as she died, people were like, we got to make her Saint Teresa because Mother Teresa had this just wonderful, wonderful life.
She, I
Same with
think, had
John.
one of the largest hearts of anyone who has ever been alive during my lifetime.
So same with John Paul. So anyway, so there's this belief that there are certain people who have lived that we know they're in heaven. So then you're like, well, what are they doing? I mean, what are these people going to do up in heaven? And the general consensus, and there is that they are uh, that they pray, and they pray for the things that they were working for on uh, while they were on Earth. So
So their
Mother
mission never
Teresa,
stopped.
yeah. So what their work that they were doing here on Earth was they had figured it out. They were doing it was literally
They
the
were
on
doing the
Earth as
Lord's
it is in
work.
heaven. That's
Yeah.
so they were on Earth and now they're in heaven doing the same thing. So people intercede to the saints. So like the Hail Mary is a prayer, but it's a prayer to Mary, the Mother of God. Um, and uh, and so anyway, So I have a saint who's like my saint, and my saint will be with me. I've got a little medallion, so my saint, my sacramental of my saint, will be with me when I get confirmed this weekend, um, or next
This
weekend.
weekend that you're getting confirmed?
It's next weekend, yeah.
Okay.
There's a but so I have like right behind me. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, there you can see it there. See the cross?
Yeah.
So that's my altar. So I've got an altar. And I have on one side of the crucifix I have a card that is a card for Saint Dymphna, and there's a prayer on the back of it for Saint Dymphna. But then I have a stack of cards, and the stack of cards are saints. They're just saints, and so I each day I pray to my saint, and I also pray to a random saint that goes through a cycle.
And how
So
is that any different than what I'm doing? That's awesome.
yeah, it's so the practices are very very similar, very
Okay.
very similar.
I having looked into a small amount of saints when we were originally talking about what the podcast was going to be. Like Saint Anthony is probably the saint of so he's the saint of lost things, and that to me just absolutely resonates. Of like, okay, I am the non-Christian, I am certainly the non-Catholic Saint Anthony.
So I have there. My saint is Saint Dymphna, who is the patron saint of mental and neurological disorders. Which is so you were talking about sociopathy, psychopathy, bipolar disorder, post traumatic stress disorder, chronic anxiety disorder, gender dysphoria, all these epilepsy, various seizure disorders.
I we don't need to talk about that one at all with me.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert for people who don't know, I have a history of them.
So, so I have people, myself and other people in my life who I know are tormented by mental illness, and they are tormented by neurological conditions. And so in my prayer to Saint Dymphna, I talk to Saint Dymphna about these people. And it ends up, and because I do that every day, and it's not like I'm saying, oh well, I'm talking to God, and God knows all, and God knows everything. I'm talking to this saint, and the story of that saint makes it very apparent to me that while she was on this earth, she did everything she could to make the lives of people suffering from mental and neurological disorders better. And she was martyred. Her dad killed her in the process. But so so anyway, so I see how those cards connect with something that can that and for me it's not necessarily more tangible than God, but a lot of times I still struggle with this whole worthiness thing. It's like, hey, why would God be that concerned about me?
Yeah.
And I know, I mean, trust me, I know, I get this is probably,
But I can
why
circle
everybody,
back to what you were just talking about. Why does God care about you? Because he cares about the one of over the 99.
that's exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But you can know those things in your head and you can actually know them in your heart, but you can also forget them in your head and you can forget them in your heart. And that's where I think a lot of our faith struggles come from is we know these things to be true, but we forget them and we need to be reminded. And I think that that's one of the things that the saints do for us is they remind us that we're not alone in this mess, that there are people who've gone through it before and got through on the other side just fine.
I have a funny story about the tarot decks for you. So Haley and I's anniversary was at the end of February, and there's a store in town called Crone's Cupboard, and we go there. It's an apothecary supply. They have a bunch of things for the altar that I have, and just all of my practices. And there's a girl who works there that was telling me. So I was in there originally getting an anniversary gift, and they have really really good gemstones, crystals, minerals, things that middle-aged white women absolutely love. Uh, and I they have a lot of really really good selections of raw minerals, and this is important to me because Haley and I have this ongoing thing because when I proposed to her, it was right after the bankruptcy. I had no money. I could not afford a ring whatsoever. And the only thing that I could afford her was just this really pale aquamarine ring. I was so poor and I couldn't get her a diamond. And that has always been her ring. She never got a wedding ring after that. The aquamarine ring is her ring, and that is now a thing between us. So for our anniversary, I wanted to get her a raw aquamarine pendant because it was anniversary and that was the whole reason. It's not because I'm trying to get whatever spiritual meaning that is associated with it. So I'm talking to the girl who's working there, and I'm explaining how at the beginning of the year, Haley wanted to finally get into tarot. She wound up ordering these books for both of us that are actually kind of cool. It's called the Ritual Journal, and it's just daily journaling of what your tarot spread is, so that way you can be reflective of everything that's going on. And it's something we were doing together. So we're talking about a bunch of things, and this girl's like, "Oh, well, we do a tarot class. This is new. It's something that I'm putting on, and it's this much to come in, but you get a tarot deck with it, and then we all kind of talk about tarot, and it's a community building thing." And I was like, "That actually sounds really cool." And I used to do my tarot account, and my wife is starting to get into it, and I built this thing for her to help her kind of understand the cards because it's really inconvenient when you're learning what all the cards actually mean to go back and forth between the books and the cards. So I just made an AI, uh, and because that's who I am. I'm the techno witch who is going to bastardize everything about the religion. So she looks at me and she's like, "You did what?" I was like, "Yeah, it's just easier, and it's still me shuffling the cards. It's still me pulling the cards. It's just I'm not looking at a book. I'm looking at I'll tell you what. We're gonna come to the class and I'll show you." So the end of the month goes, and as we're pulling up, I'm just thinking, this is not going to be my crowd of people, I don't think, actually. Uh I know the crowd of people that goes to tarot classes and the crowd of people that typically go to stores like this, and I usually am an odd duck everywhere I go, and this community is not any exception to that rule whatsoever.
It's like me when I go to a poetry reading.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, I get it. Your heart's here, but you're not our usual type. Uh, so,
You don't talk about flowers.
so I get in there, and it's kind of the community I'm expecting it to be. It's a lot of new age, 30-ish age people. And they all get into the conversation. They're all playing with their tarot decks, and then the conversation begins of, okay, so how do the spirits talk to you, and how do you interpret the cards, and how do you get the meaning out of all of this? And I'm just listening. I am not putting in any part of my conversation to ruin their good time whatsoever. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's cool. And I'm watching this girl across from me, and she is just shuffling, looking at the cards, understanding, shuffling, looking at the cards, understanding. And I can tell she's been doing it for years and actually understands every single meaning. Um, I have a decent understanding of the minor arcana. I have a halfway okay understanding of some of the cards in the major arcana. I have a really hard time of recognizing it immediately because that's just where I'm at. So watching her, I'm like, you are a machine. Like you just understand everything that you're doing. So the question gets asked to me, okay, Chris, so how do the cards communicate to you? And now everyone at this table is looking at me. I'm like, I don't think you guys are gonna like what it is that I have to say, but I completely bastardized everything that most people in this purview of religion believe in, and I just 100% trained in AI, and I think it actually does a better job because the AI is also a journal. So I talk about all the things that are going on in my life, and then it tells me, okay, go ahead and do your draw. And then because it knows the meaning of the cards, and then it sees all the things that are going on in my life, it has a better way of conveying that message to me to be like, well, this is going on, so this is your past, and this is what's going on in your present. So clearly, these are some things that you need to look at, and here's kind of the future that you're going to. And then I get to have this whole introspective study that I'm collaborating with something. And the blank stares that I get from these people are just like, wait, what? I was like, well, yeah, and it kind of gets rid of the theatrics, which is the wrong word to use. 100% the wrong word to use. And the girl who's running the class is like, what do you mean theatrics?
It's
Oh,
like in my generation when Geraldo Rivera was looking at a wrestler. I can't remember the wrestler's name, but he's like, I think it's fake. He was talking about at the time. I think it was WWF
right.
wrestling, and the guy's like, fake. Whap! Slaps him upside his head, and Geraldo goes down to the floor.
Yeah.
He stands back up, and the guy slaps him with the other hand and knocks him down the other way. So yeah, so that's what I was thinking of when you said they were blank stares. I was thinking of the
Yeah.
uh,
Not too far off. So I'm explaining to her. I was like, well, here's kind of the thing. You've got your deck, and then you've got the person who's like, okay, you've got the Ten of Cups, and then the Page of Cups, and the Death card. And it just becomes theatrical. And you kind of infer meaning through the way that you talk about the card, and you just don't let the information be the information. And I just need the information to be the information. I don't need to have your vocal sentiment of what you're interpreting it to be as. I just want to understand what the meaning is and how it conveys to my life. I don't need anything past that. It's a very transactional thing because I'm wanting to understand what it is that I need to work on. I don't need anything past that. So it's not that you guys are like, "Woo, look at this. This is what it is," and that it's a fake thing, but there is a certain showmanship when you go and have a reading done because that person is also wanting to convey a certain level of expertise. For example, this woman across from me, I have been watching her and I've been watching you. You are a machine. I'm just looking at you and you have understanding and no theatrics. You just do things, you recognize it, and you understand. That's what I want, but I'm not there. And that's why this thing to me gives me a better way of understanding. And then it kind of removes the religion of, is it the right religion? Is it the wrong religion? Is it demons talking? No, it's just meanings behind the cards and how it relates to me, and it's a reflection. And it's my personal prayer and the way that I go through those things. Um, so then I wind up having one of them try and use my bot, and I made her cry because it was so relevant. And I was like, see, AI is taking everyone's jobs.
yeah, they're so funny. I was down on when I was eating my pizza on Pearl Street earlier this evening. It was a very Pearl Street experience because I'm sitting there on the patio eating, a couple of pieces of pie,
Is there a guy on a
and
unicycle?
Say again?
Was there a guy on a unicycle?
No, but there was a guy playing a piano and beautiful, just absolutely beautiful, playing a piano and just one song after another, and it was just delightful. And then there was a guy next to him, and he was like AI Ernie or something like that. He had a table and he had a sign that said AI Ernie or something like that. But so when you go down on Pearl Street, it's Saturday, so you go down and it's a beautiful day today. So there's um, I mean, there's always performers. There's the guy who knows you. You can just tell him your zip code and he knows exactly where in the country you're from. There's guys who juggle knives and fire and there's a guy anyway. So there's
There's
just
buskers everywhere.
yeah, there's buskers everywhere. And what's interesting is because I've lived here for so long, I know the guys. I mean, there's some people who are just there for that year. They're just there for that season. Um, and then they go away and maybe that was like their year off of college or whatever. But there are people who that this is their living and this is what they do all the time, and they
Well,
just can't make a living during the winter. So during the winter, they'll be like a barista or a server or whatever just to make money to get by. But as soon as the weather gets nice, they they're performers and they make money performing in front of busking.
is your buddy who was doing the guitar solos in front of all of his action figures still out there?
No, I see him like every once in a while, but he hasn't been. I think he's going down to what is it? I think 13th Street in Denver because
Okay.
there's a street in Denver that does very much the same thing. It's a a walking. Although they have buses and trains that go up and down it, but it's kind of the same thing.
Well, I think that that is going to probably be a good place for us to stop because otherwise we're just going to wind up getting back into politics. And it's nice when we can actually end the episode on a nice topic instead.
Yeah, yeah, we're talking about there's a praying to the saints and reading tarot cards.
Well, and I think that this is probably the best way we can end an episode because how many people would actually think that a Catholic practice and something that's largely related with a pagan practice can actually have common ground? That is ultimately why we're doing this entire thing. And I don't think that there's a better way of ending an episode. So I will say this for all of you who have been listening. Thank you very much. We continue always appreciating the fact that you guys are continuing to listen to us and that you are supporting us. And if you want to continue supporting us, it would be fantastic to drop us a follow. We are on Spotify, we are on Amazon Music, we are on YouTube. And if you want to hear any of our opinions on anything, we would love comments. You can even find us on social medias. My social media is easy to Chris.
And on Twitter, I am at Sua Sponte Steve.
You
And
can
on
also find just the Supper Talk podcast on a bunch of different social media
yeah,
platforms. And then you had mentioned in the ending last time about if people wanted to help specific causes. What was that you were talking about last week?
I don't remember.
Well, you should go back into the last episode and listen to that. And until then, we will talk to you next week. And thank you again so much. Be well and have a great week.
Take care. See y'all.